Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart.
Righteous anger should lead you from apathy to action.
I'm going to quote my church again in the whole thing. That's good.
Welcome to the Bible in 1 Year podcast, brought to you by two Brits and a Bible. If you like the idea of engaging in a casual but meaningful chat about the Bible with a couple of mates, stay tuned in. This podcast is probably for you.
Today is day 90, covering 1 Samuel 15, 16, and 17. If you want a brief overview of these chapters, they're in the description. Let's go. I'm excited for tomorrow because it will mark a quarter of the way through the Bible in a year. So we'll definitely shout out to that. Yeah.
I'm excited for today because it's such an important chunk of the Bible. David being introduced, David and Goliath, like all that stuff, man. So we got a lot to cover, basically, don't we?
We do. So we'll start with Saul's disobedience, I suppose, and then that leads us nicely eventually into David's obedience. So Saul is told to kill everything, right? Men, women, children, everything. And yet he keeps some of the best sheep and oxen and so on to sacrifice to the Lord. And that's 1 Samuel 15:15. And I'm just like face palming as I read it. I'm like, just do what God says. He specifically says in verse 2, right?
Yeah, exactly
that. Then there's a little bit of anthropopapism as well, where God says, I regret that I have made Saul king. And God's outside of time, so he knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
So, that's for our benefit. And then just one more, like I'll do a little trilogy here, I suppose. I just love that Saul kind of denies this to Samuel, and then Samuel says, well, then what is this bleating of sheep in my ears?
Oh, it's so good. That is my sense of humor to a T. Samuel, what a boy.
I have to say, as I was reading it, I was thinking of you a little bit with that one, because yes, so your humor. I loved it. I just said banter from Samuel.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's I'm going to basically touch on all those same things that you did really just there, because it starts by saying, and I found it quite interesting, and literally 1 Samuel 15 verse 2, this is what the Lord Almighty says, I will punish the Amalekites. God is saying he will do it. It doesn't say, Saul, you go punish them. He's saying, I will do it, but now go and totally destroy all that belongs to them. And obviously he doesn't. He spared Agag and the best of the sheep, the cattle, and the fat calves, which is then verse 9, which to me, it's further example of Saul's lack of obedience. The obedience is greater than sacrifice, which we come on to in just a minute as well. And then again, Samuel's then saying in verse 19, why did you not obey the Lord? And what I find interesting in there is then he says, but I did obey the Lord. Sorry, my phone is on loud. He's like, I did obey the Lord. It's like, no, you didn't. You freaking jackass. You didn't obey the Lord. And then, just Samuel, that's obviously where he comes out with this whole thing of like, does the Lord delight in burnt offering and sacrifices as much as obeying in the Lord? To obey is better than sacrifice. 1 Samuel 15 verse 22, to obey is better than sacrifice. One of the most important little verses of the Bible.
And it's important to just quickly mention, I was going to talk about that too, of course. Adam bought me my copy of the Bible right here when I first became a Christian, and he actually had highlighted 1 Samuel 15:22 and had put obedience is greater than sacrifice.
In mine as well.
And well, he's got in his copy as well. So I love that. Can
I just touch before then as well? In verse 12, early in the morning, Samuel got up, went to meet Saul, but he was told, Saul has gone up to Carmel. There he has set up a monument in his own honor. So now he's starting to show pride as well. It mentioned, I think, on yesterday or a day or two ago, how he, at that stage, built, the day before, 1 Samuel 14:35, he built an altar to the Lord, but now he's building an altar to himself in his own honor. So he's really starting to show pride. He's lying. He's being disobedient. It's really starting to show the downfall of the poor boy.
It's a really good point. So I've got to just quickly shout out to my friend Michael, who I call Brother Michael, good Christian lad. Anyway, one of his favorite verses in the entire Bible is 1 Samuel 16:7. Do not look on his appearance or on the height of his stature, because I have rejected him. For the Lord sees not as a man sees. man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. I just think that that's so cool. And obviously Saul was like unusually like handsome and tall, right, and all that stuff. Yeah. Whereas David is just some little farmer boy, and everyone's like, what's the deal with that? And you know, Samuel's saying like God doesn't see us the way that we see and judge each other at all. He sees what's inside. And I just think that's so powerful.
It is, man. It is. It's a great parallel between tall and handsome and a little farmer boy. A
little farmer boy.
With his big muscles from working in the field.
That's fair. I like the way you tried to even out the insult there. But yeah, no,
while I'm
absolutely.
drawing parallels, I found a really interesting little parallel in here, where 15 verse 24, Saul is saying, I was afraid of the men, so I gave in to them, which is pretty much exactly what Aaron did when he made the golden calf, right? And he's like, oh, the people asked for it, so I did it. And this goes on, it's a starting of a point in Saul, like a character trait where he gives in to the loudest voice, basically. He's so far one way and the other, rather than just being true to what he believes. But that, I was just like, that kind of sounds a bit like Aaron to me.
Can I just say that this is definitely our best episode ever, and we're just on fire right now. So, you know,
you've got 4 minutes to go.
Yeah, absolutely right. So we won't get too bogged down in stuff above our pay grade, but I thought it was interesting that the Lord fills Saul with a harmful spirit. And then I don't know the significance of this, but, you know, I heard there was a secret chord which David played and it pleased the Lord, right?
Is that in here? I didn't highlight that bit.
Yeah, well, it was actually some lyrics rather than, yeah. But I just found that really interesting, that the only thing that soothes Saul from this point is David's harp playing, right? There's probably something really interesting there. We'll have to ask a theologian. If you've got any comments about it, listeners and watchers, please let us know. And then we got, you know, little David and Goliath, haven't we?
Exactly. Just a little story in the Bible. Firstly, fairly needless point, but being 6 cubits and a span meant he was about 9'5", so he was a pretty big lad. And then for me, this is where there's so cool. I mean, we'll probably come back in a little bit, but what I really like is David wasn't upset about the cost to the Israelites and stuff like that. He was upset about the insult against God when he's talking about who is this in 17 verse 26, who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? And that just brought up to me this whole concept of righteous anger should lead you from apathy to action. And he sit there and get pissed off about it. He's like, I'm doing something about this jackass. You know,
I'm going to quote my church again in the whole thing. That's good right there. Absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. And I just think that 1 Samuel 17:26, I think this is what you just were talking about as well, just the bravery of that as well. It just reminds me of other great leaders of the past, particularly like Joshua of Nun, for example.
Exactly.
And what's interesting then to develop on from there in some sense is the men of Israel and Judah rose. This is 1 Samuel 17:52. And it's just this reminder as well that with strong leadership comes bravery in a society, right? So Israel is way braver and better whenever it has a strong leader to guide them forward. And it's when they don't have that they descend even worse.
And it's David who's found strength in the Lord, basically. Saul said, go and the Lord be with you. Like, his security is in God's strength, not his own. God saved me from the paw of the lion and the bear. He'll save me against this cowboy. Like, and so, it's fantastic.
Brilliant image of Goliath as a cowboy for a second. I've got pretty much got through everything I wanted to. Just one very quick thing: 40 days the Philistine came forward, obviously 40 being the date, symbolic of probation. Other than that, I'm pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. I know that also another sort of part I just mentioned briefly about how Saul and Aaron were kind of linked. Obviously, then the two different paths that these guys take. Aaron showed then humility and went on to do incredible things for God, whereas Saul continued down that same track. I've mentioned previously about it's like when your wheel of a wagon gets stuck in a rut, and the further you go down the rut, the deeper it gets, the more difficult it is to clamber out. You kind of have to back up, start again, and go straight. So interesting the way that the two of them, if you drew a parallel, then went so differently. So that's cool. Well, tomorrow's reading is going to be 1 Samuel 18, 19 and 20. So why don't you beautiful people pick up your Bible and get yourself reading?
In the meantime, please consider joining us on social media at 2 Brits and a Bible and sharing this with someone to help spread the word of God.